You for those powerful words, Jim. Blue Meridian Partners are some of our closest and most important partners here at the Institute. And as we think about our work together going forward, we need to think about what a different kind of infrastructure will look like. I really hear you on this point, Jim, that we need to evolve the container that we've established for this work nationally and think about how to grow it together. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So I'm pleased to be joined by a colleague of mine, Simone Brody, for this conversation. Simone joins us from What Works Cities at Results for America. And as part of this partnership, we also know she's representing us on behalf of the Opportunity Accelerator. So she wears quite a few hats, but most importantly for today, she's helping us to think about what it means to really field build in this work, defining that, and furthermore, thinking about the role of principles and how we might coalesce as a field. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Simone, who's going to share a little bit of context about how these principles came together. And we're going to then break out into an interactive discussion. We're going to hear from you all about how this might take hold, how we might operationalize this work, and how our field building efforts can be most supportive for you, the folks doing this work across communities in this country. So with that, Simone.
Thank you so much, Hayling. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be with all of you and so inspired by your work and everything we've heard today. All of you have been driving incredible impact in your communities, and over the last decade have really built models that are the secret sauce to your success, some of which we've talked about today. And the field of place-based work continues to evolve, but a field has really emerged, and more communities are recognizing the importance of local work to drive systems transformation that can really change what opportunity looks like in this country, as we've talked about. A lot of research shows that field building is really critical to driving the long-term and sustained and scalable, as we've talked about, success of any movement. If you think about the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, Freedom to Marry, Green Buildings Council, it's the kind of scalable impact that Jeff, that Connie, and that Jim just talked about realizing for our young people. And that there really are core components of field building that have emerged to drive sustainably impactful movements. And I'll share what those are briefly here. The first is focused around principles and standards, and we'll focus the session today on that. The second is this idea of really a shared identity that participants can connect to. I think we all agree that we are made better by finding our people and by learning from them. The third is around capacity, resources to support the movement, and a base of shared knowledge. The next is about leadership, so many of you here in this room, and the activation of grassroots partners and community ownership and empowerment of the work. And the last is funding and policy that really provides that foundational fertile ground for systems transformation and change. And over the last year plus, the great leaders in the place-based movement, many of whom you've heard from today, really came together to determine what is the best way to drive sustained, deep impact and to scale it to many more places around the country that need this work. And they recognize that there are defining elements that have driven all of your ability to improve opportunities. And in a few meetings together back in the day when we could meet in person, they began to really identify and align on what some of those things were. And so the principles that we'll be talking about were born, and I'll turn it to Hayling to talk a little bit more about those.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so when we think about place-based work and the principles that can drive that work, we want to really coalesce around a shared set of language and ideas, not sort of the letter of the law that we'll all be beholden to, but a really baseline level of standards that we know will ensure accountability. So when we think about field building work, we know that it's going to be insufficient and sort of fall short of what we aspire to for the field if one organization does it. Now, we're proud of what we built here at HCZ, but we can't do it alone, and we can't replicate this. We cannot sort of think about the scale of leadership, the resources that we have here, and just transplant that into communities across the country. But what we can do is support organizations and community leaders who are interested in shifting the conditions that hold these challenges in place. And that's how we think about field building. And we define that as intentional coordination in an effort to elevate and sustain best practices. So when we think about coming together, we're positioning the Institute as a sort of catalyst for folks who are in this room, some who are not, to really come together and think about what it looks like to elevate place-based work and move population level outcomes at scale. And we can think about this across sort of a phase of maturity, if you will. And these three phases are displayed on the slide that Simone's showing. So the emerging phase is really about impact, which has been scattered. I think traditionally, we've seen pockets of success. We've been excited about the work happening across the country, but there hasn't always been a sustained national dialogue about what's working. Shout out to What Works Cities. We also understanding that there hasn't necessarily been a shared definition of what excellence looks like. And we now find ourselves what I think is in the second phase of the spectrum, which is the forming phase. And this is where we're beginning to sort of congeal and sort of converge around a set of principles and think more deeply again about what good really looks like. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. But for us, we recognize we're at a critical inflection point. And I think today, this convening is an example of the role we seek to play as a field leader and bring the folks together to ask the hard questions and really push the frontier of what is possible in place-based work. And with this mind going forward, we hope to achieve the sort of evolving and sustained phase where we've deepened the connective tissue across the place-based organizations doing this work. We know that one size does not fit all. This work needs to be sort of driven by neighborhoods, culturally responsive, really in tune with the local needs, but also meeting a baseline set of expectations and indicators and excellence, the quality we know it's going to take to pull this off. And some of the finer points of that are points that we've heard from our speakers throughout the day. So we know that we'll need to right-size these solutions for local context, but we also need to raise the floor for what it looks like to do this work well. Can we move to the next slide, Simone? Thank you. So briefly, how we think about this work. So one of the great opportunities I have here at the HCZ is leading our Practitioners Institute. This institute is an opportunity for us to basically open up the hood and share some information about what it's taken to do this work. We tell our story and we offer workshops and training opportunities for leaders from around the world. And throughout the years, we've extended this opportunity to over 500 communities in the US and over 70 countries have come to visit us. And we know that's just potentially a sliver of the folks globally who are pursuing this work. So when we think about what it takes to align, we recognize that there are a number of folks who are operating sort of in deep solidarity, deep in their communities, but who are also looking to get connected and get on the same page. So we want to make sure we're providing a space for folks to do that. So when we think about how principles can drive the field, and we're going to get into sort of the granular elements of those principles in a moment, there are a few things we want to do. We want to accelerate this movement. This is the movement that Jeff kicked us off with this morning, thinking about what it looks like to create opportunity for every neighborhood, for every young person, so that their identity doesn't drive their life outcomes. A shared identity, so that the folks who opted into today's conversation recognize that our dialogue doesn't end today. That going forward, we're going to be working hand in hand, partnering with you all in different ways to think about how to pull this off in ways that are responsive to community needs. And then again, aligning on what good looks like. This is a mantra that we developed with Jim and the team over at Blue Meridian Partners. We're all accountable for making this good, right? So I think the principles can play a key role in bringing us together and ensuring that we are actually improving outcomes at scale and doing so in a way that instills accountability. So Simone's going to walk us through what this looks like at a high level, and then we're going to give you all an opportunity with the help of some facilitators and note takers to think through how we might operationalize these principles and all play a proactive role in building this field that we're discussing.
Thanks, Hayling. Given our short time together, we're going to briefly share really the overall framework for the principles, and we'll drop in the specific principles for you to be able to spend some time on your breakout sessions. You'll have a chance to dig in, and I think, our goal in this work is really that these are co-owned by this group and the many other incredible folks doing this work. So would really love constant and continuous feedback as we iterate to make them better. We'll start with the outcomes framework, which really builds on a theme of today, which is that data is central. The idea that we can really ensure partnerships set goals, assess progress, and continuously improve with a focus on disaggregated data to understand how programs affect individuals, not just averages, not just overall communities, but individuals. And it's really the learning and accountability mechanism of all of the work. How do we know this works and how do we iterate to improve results? I think one good example of a specific principle in that framework is the idea that we can collect data to demonstrate how a specific intervention contributes to population level change. You can see more of them when you dig in on the specific principles. The second category is around values and beliefs, thinking about the underlying attitudes and mindsets about how systems work and how partners can engage to sustain impact. It's the culture, it's the mindset that all of you have in all of your organizations, the belief that change and transformational change is possible. I think one really critical one that we've talked about a lot today is really recognizing that to do this work successfully, you have to take on racial and social inequities. And it's not about adjusting within existing systems. It's really about re-engineering systems and having the mindset and the boldness to be able to do that in this work. The next category focuses on the characteristics and conditions for success. We've talked a little bit about sort of what is the fertile ground and the foundational knowledge and work that needs to happen to make this possible, thinking about the components that are in place and how they come together. The idea, again, that we've talked about, many of the principles have come up just today, the idea of co-ownership of a plan that's built through ongoing and authentic partnership with the community, ongoing feedback and iteration that really represents the community's needs. And then finally, the fourth area is around core capacities, really thinking about the skills, the behaviors, the traits, and the core capacity that teams and communities must learn to drive improvement. We're really focused here around talent development within organizations across communities, thinking about the data capacity of teams, thinking about delivery, service delivery, thinking about the role that communications and storytelling plays in this work, and about building trust and relationships in communities. I know that was a whirlwind, and you're going to have some more time, as I said, to dig in during your breakouts, and I'll pass it back to Hayling so that we can get into those conversations.
Thank you, Simone. Appreciate that. So if we can head to the last slide here, I don't know if it's visible. We have a few questions we wanted to tee up for the group, and what we're going to do is split you up among our capable facilitators. The idea here is to think about these following questions and also take a deeper dive into the principles. So too long to enumerate here, but a number of ideas that we think fit across those different categories Simone just described. So we're going to drop a link into the chat once we break out and request that you all take 2 to 3 minutes to review quickly. And then we're going to have a facilitated conversation to begin to dive in. Again, these principles are not fully baked. These are sort of a draft that we've thought about in the effort of field building, but we want to make sure these are aligned with the reality of folks leading this work on the ground every day. We want to hear from you all. So please be generous with your feedback. Take your time to digest. And if you have remaining questions at the session's close, feel free to contact us directly offline so we can sort of parse through more of the input. And with that, I'm going to pass it to our breakout facilitators. Thanks.